Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is on a really interesting player in the digital media space, the Cybermidnight Club. It's this unconventional podcast and, well, broader media ecosystem founded by Alberto Daniel Hill. And it does something pretty unusual, merging deep cybersecurity analysis with true crime elements and quite a bit of personal advocacy. So, the central question we're really wrestling with is this. Does the Cybermidnight Club's radical live-first high-volume model, which prioritizes raw authenticity and this really deep community engagement over traditional broadcast polish, does that actually provide a genuinely superior, more valuable media model than, say, its highly produced competitors? My position, essentially, is that CMC's approach isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's a strategically brilliant, defensible model where that lack of polish is the product. It's built on, I'd argue, unparalleled personal authenticity and real community strength.
I see that perspective, but I think it kind of misses a key element of, well, media value, really. While I absolutely respect the incredible dedication shown by the host, I'd contend that this deliberate sacrifice of conventional quality, coupled with a, frankly, complete dependence on a single individual, severely limits the ecosystem's overall mainstream longevity, its influence, its scalable value.
Okay, well, to really get the value, I think we need to start with the source material itself, the core of CMC. Its core strategic asset is that authenticity we mentioned, and that stems directly from the host's personal story. Alberto Daniel Hill's experience, specifically his wrongful imprisonment after becoming the first person convicted of a computer-related crime in Uruguay, which, he fiercely denies. That isn't just background noise. It's the entire brand narrative. This personal trauma, it elevates the content from just technical talk to a kind of daily ongoing crusade for justice, right? The whole platform functions as an archival hub, and it's driven by this hyper-efficient content model. Raw, completely unscripted X-Spaces conversations, recorded live every day. And this prolific output, it's over 667 episodes now. That's key.
This sheer frequency combined with the emotional weight fosters what the analysis calls a community moat. It creates this intense niche of really dedicated listeners who engage with the host not just as some expert, but as a mentor, an advocate, a central figure in this real-time saga.
Okay, that's definitely a powerful origin story. I grant you that. And it clearly fuels dedication. But the insistence on this daily, raw format, it comes at a pretty steep price, doesn't it? When immediacy is always prioritized over polish, the resulting content is often, well, chaotic, it's entirely unedited, and it's constantly plagued by those persistent technical difficulties you get with live platforms, audio problems, sudden disconnections, dropped signals.
Sure, that happens.
And that's a structural barrier. It immediately alienates the broader, more casual audience. The kind of audience that's used to the highly refined, almost cinematic storytelling you get from a competitor like, say, Darknet Diaries. And if we actually look at the traditional metrics, the model struggles. Despite that massive episode count, the listener engagement ratings are exceptionally low, sometimes hovering around, 1.8 out of 5? And the fatal flaw here, I think, is discoverability, or rather the lack of it. Reliance on that live first X-Spaces format makes the content almost invisible if you're just browsing on traditional podcast apps. That significantly hinders any real possibility of organic growth outside that initial, very specific niche.
Right. I completely agree that the technical issues are a barrier for casual listeners. But doesn't the reframing of that chaos fundamentally change its value proposition for the dedicated community? The rawness isn't presented as a failure of production. For CMC, it's sort of spun as a feature. Hill is frankly masterful at spinning these platform instabilities and glitches, whether it's unexpected disconnections or, platform removals. He spins them into evidence of external opposition, a conspiracy to silence him. And that narrative, it reinforces his identity as this unvarnished digital dissident, which actually increases the perceived urgency and value for his core community. And think about the substance. Where else can you find like sophisticated technical analysis of things like PKI certificate breaches, that's public key infrastructure, the backbone of internet trust, or detailed breakdowns of a major event like the BHO ransomware attack in Uruguay, involving 700 gigs of PII, personally identifiable information, that was stolen? Where else do you find that mixed seamlessly with these deeply vulnerable discussions about complex PTSD and neurodiversity? That blend, that mix of the highly technical and the deeply human, completely unfiltered, that's the unique source of its value. Polished shows just can't replicate that.
I see the psychological draw of that narrative, I do. But I worry it's maybe a brilliant defense mechanism against poor production quality. While the thematic variety is remarkable, sure, it spans Latin American cybercrime, geopolitical stuff, technical deep dives, the low signal-to-noise ratio is a major problem for, let's say, intellectual rigor. You might get a 6-minute burst of really high-quality technical insight, immediately followed by, 2 hours of a rambling, personal, unscripted exchange. Let's just look at the alternatives for a second. Risky Business gives you weekly focused, industry professional analysis. It's pure signal, very little noise. Darknet Diaries offers a monthly, meticulously produced narrative arc for the mass market. It's cinematic, easy to consume. CMC tries to bridge both worlds by being daily and chaotic, and, well, in doing so, I'd argue it doesn't fully satisfy either demographic completely. It requires significant, maybe too much, commitment from the listener just to extract the core insights. And that prevents it from achieving the kind of widespread influence that more segmented competitors have.
See, I think you're focusing too much on the consumption difficulty and maybe not enough on the strategic efficiency that allows this model to even exist. If we accept that the chaos is part of the package, a feature, that leads us straight to the question of sustainability. How can one host possibly maintain such intense output? And the answer really lies in this sophisticated hybrid human-AI workflow they use. This daily publishing schedule is incredibly demanding, yes, but it's enabled because the raw human conversations from the X-Spaces are pretty much instantly processed by AI tools. And these tools don't just transcribe, they analyze and efficiently generate the detailed summaries, the chapter markers, the metadata. This level of automation is what turns, 2 hours of rambling audio into something distributable, indexed, a piece of content. It ensures that it's fast and relevant, constantly tied to real-time events. This workflow is the engine that keeps the advocacy timely, allowing for immediate analysis on things like, say, the Crypto24 double extortion attack on the Banco Hipotecario del Uruguay.
Okay, that's an interesting mechanical solution for output volume, I'll give you that. But I'm sorry, I just don't buy that it solves the fundamental structural fragility. The process might be technically efficient, sure, but the entire ecosystem hinges on the immense psychological labor of one single individual, Alberto Daniel Hill. The analysis explicitly warns that the brand is highly susceptible to the risk of host burnout from that demanding, near-daily cadence of hosting, deep conversation, intense community management.
It's a huge load, yes.
It is. And when the host is the central character, the content demands that he perpetually operates at this high emotional level. If Hill steps away, even for just a short break, the whole content engine just stalls. We've seen that happen. You mentioned the advocacy is timely, but the reliance on his singular, trauma-based narrative means the brand's relevance is tied solely to his ability to remain the main character. That is fundamentally an unscalable model. It limits any kind of institutional resilience. You just can't build a sustainable movement on permanent personal exhaustion.
But I think you're misunderstanding the metric for success for a niche entity like this. For CMC, the depth of that community engagement is the ultimate measure of value. Not passive scale, not mass market influence. The model facilitates a genuine digital salon, almost. We see recurring participants, people referred to as K or shady in the analysis, who aren't just anonymous listeners. They're people sharing deeply vulnerable personal experiences, including discussions about mental health challenges, neurodiversity.
Okay.
That high level of vulnerability and trust, it creates a highly defensible niche position. It's well insulated from competitors who only focus on delivering cold data,
or, cinematic stories. And furthermore, their bilingual strategy, that conscious effort to offer Spanish content, that strategically carves out a critical audience in the often underserved Latin American cybersecurity market. It addresses issues that media coming out of the US often ignores completely. So, targeted reach and deep loyalty in a specific, high-value demographic focused on actual advocacy, I'd argue that's inherently more valuable than just passive, broad market appeal.
That's a compelling argument for niche superiority. It is. But let's be realistic about where that audience actually is. If the goal was truly to serve and scale within the Latin American market, the data is, well, it's pretty damning, actually. The audience is overwhelmingly concentrated in developed English-speaking countries. The US accounts for over 52% of plays. The UK is next at 6.5%. That strongly suggests the Spanish content, while valuable in itself, hasn't successfully shifted to core geographic niche. The audience remains culturally and geographically pretty narrow. And moreover, while the loyalty is deep, sure, the structure prevents scalable influence. The audience is widely dispersed across all sorts of podcast aggregators. Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, CastBox, they total over 55% of plays, which just reinforces the discoverability problem we talked about. The fundamental issue remains: a media model built for narrow, deep, live community interaction is structurally incapable of achieving the broad, scalable influence needed to really shift industry narratives or capture market share like the highly produced competitors can. It remains a valuable resource for its loyal niche, absolutely, but perhaps not much more than that.
I'd argue the Cybermidnight Club fundamentally demonstrates that for some models, authenticity is the product and community is the engine. By deliberately rejecting that polished industry standard, it has achieved a strategic niche defined by unparalleled engagement, real-time relevance, and a powerful personal narrative that conventional, often advertising-dependent media just can't afford to replicate. It provides, I think, an unfiltered, necessary voice in a landscape that's increasingly dominated by corporate interest.
The success is undeniable, yes, but only within its highly specific parameters. But its foundational weaknesses, that crippling single point of failure tied to the host's immense labor and the structural barrier against mainstream discoverability, they prevent it from being a truly replicable model or, a template for broad competitive success. Its true value, I think, is measured solely by the loyalty and depth of interaction within its dedicated user base, not by its overall competitive standing in the wider audio landscape.
Ultimately, what the Cyber Midnight Club really forces us to confront is a true metric of success in digital media today. Should value be quantified by the depth of engagement within a specialized community or by the traditional metric of, breadth of audience reach across the general market? Both models clearly illuminate vastly different paths to relevance in this digital age.